Okay, so I've slept most of today. I was really tired. It's now almost 4 o'clock in the morning where I'm at, and I'm gonna go ahead and open up this Dungeons and Dragon Warduke Ultimate Action Figure, which is made by Neca. There's the bottom. There's some credits on there. We're gonna read those in a minute. Got a picture of the figure on this side. On this other side, we have the Dungeons and Dragons logo with fancy looking ampersand and the character's name and portrait of the character at the bottom. Again, this is a photo of the action figure. We have a very nice piece of artwork on the front. We will find out who the artist is when we read the credits. So, open it up. We got another picture of Warduke here, and then there's the Warduke figure itself. And we do have a bio on the back, a full bio, and a list of the accessories. So let's go ahead and read through that real quick. Warduke fights as a remote. Start all over again. Warduke fights as a remorseless, cold-hearted mercenary who works for coin. The evil swordsman serves Keelek as a cohort and adventuring companion from time to time. He wields a flame-tongued longsword and wears a dread helm. That's way worse than a dreaded helmet. Uh, he never removes his helmet to reveal his face to others, but the visage beneath is that of a grim, hideously scarred gladiator. Includes longsword with flame effect, short sword, dagger, skull shield, and interchangeable hands. So, when I was a kid, I did not have too many Dungeons and Dragons figures. I don't quite know why, because I did like them. So, I think that like maybe my mom was a little bit uncomfortable with me collecting them because like she felt they were a little old for me. I seem to remember that. Uh, but she was fine with me like having like He-Man and stuff. But I think Dungeons and Dragons was just maybe a little too edgy, maybe a little too, for kids a bit more mature than I was. Like I don't think she had any kind of moral problem with it. It wasn't any kind of satanic panic, even though it does clearly state on here that this is an evil action figure. Because like my uncles played D&D, you know, but but I think she probably just felt it was like maybe a little too old for me. I don't know. I could be mistaken, but I think that's probably why I didn't have too many of them. It does have cross-style artwork for one other figure, which is I'm trying to get it at an angle where the light isn't hitting it from the phone. Uh, Give a little bit of a look at him. Grim Sword, Evil Knight, who's a guy with a basically black and gray armor and a snake wrapped around him. He's kind of cool looking, but he's not as cool as Warduke. I mean, like Warduke was to me the coolest of all the Dungeons and Dragons figures, and I like this figure very much. And got a little something else here. We've got 40th anniversary He-Man because we're going to see how well Warduke scales with the Masterverse line, and then also it'll see how well it scales with the Masters of the Universe Classics line, which is the same size. I also have with me this Wonder Woman action figure that I created myself. This is one that I 3D printed, and it's one of the Zip Guy figures. This is actually the Zip Gal. I believe it's the first Zip Gal that has been released so far. It's the first one I've been able to get a hold of anyway. So, isn't she pretty? Like, I printed this out and painted it specifically to look like the Superpowers figure. That's why she's got, like, dark blue bracelets instead of silver bracelets. You can see she's a little wobbly because I don't think I put the middle section together as well as I possibly could have. So she wound up being a little wobbly. I think when I try to do a second one of these and I do her in the more modern colors where she's got like silver bracelets and gold at the bodice and everything like that. I think when I do that, I'm going to try to just do the inner joints here in the more traditional way where you just kind of have a hook that a zip tie goes through. And like I tried to do the joint thing and it didn't work out so well. And like I said, I'm pretty sure that's user error. That's some of my fault. But I'm going to see how well she scales with Warduke also, because when I was a kid and I had the original Warduke figures, one of the things that I used them for was I used them as Ares to fight my superpowers Wonder Woman. So I already cut that. What am I doing? So I want to see how well they scale together. So anyway, let me go ahead and read the credits on the bottom, and then we'll get to opening this. Development and direction: Randy Falk and Stefan Fulkins. Sculpt and fabrication: Thomas Gwynn. Paint: John Wardell and Jeffrey Trapp. Prototypes: Roger Fernandez. Photography: Stephen Mazurek, if I pronounced that correctly. Packaging: Chris Longo. And cover illustration is Daniel Horn. So I would like to thank all of those people for producing this great action figure with its great packaging. So it's very nicely done. The design of it reminds me a lot of Dungeons and Dragons game boxes. I suppose that's the intention. It probably looks like one of the more modern ones. It doesn't look like exactly like the one that I remember from when I was a kid, but it still has that same sort of flavor to it. So anyway, let's go ahead and open them up. Go. Yeah, I pre-ordered this guy from Big Bad Toy Store. Like, it must have been a year ago, like over a year ago, like around last Christmas. Not this past Christmas, last Christmas. So he must have got delayed something awful. I mean, a lot of stuff has been delayed because of reasons that we won't get into right now. And it seems like this packaging is pretty fancy, where you've got like these plastic pieces, these little plastic inserts that fit over this to hold all the weapons in and everything, which is good because that means less twist ties for me to deal with, less little plastic tabs for me to deal with. And I don't like that kind of stuff at all. So there's Warduke's sword. It's a pretty, distinct looking sword. It looks a lot like the one I remember from when I was a kid, except for the one I remember when I was a kid, instead of gold, it was yellow. And that's going to be like a running. Oops. I forgot to take that thing out. So that's going to be a running thing with this figure is that he's got a lot of gold, where on the original figure it used to be yellow. But obviously they're going for a more realistic sort of look. So, the gold was clearly supposed to be like what the color was on the original figure, like they colored it yellow because it was an action figure and they didn't use a lot of metallics on action figures back then. But it was clearly supposed to be gold. So there's the flame that's going to go on his long sword. And since they fell out of the package earlier, we'll see the extra hands. So he has one pointing hand. So that's pretty cool. And I noticed that the thumb is actually a little more separated from the rest of the fist than you might expect. So you can maybe fit something in there, like amulet or something if you wanted to. And then we have this open left hand, which has got like all kinds of armor plating on it. You can see it's got a brown leather glove. And then another right hand, which this is another gripping hand. But it looks like there's a gripping hand that's on the wrist right now. I'm not sure what the difference is, but we will compare those shortly. So here is, this one is supposed to be the short sword, since it does match up with the larger sword a bit more with its gold handle and its red gem in the hilt. So since they look more like a matching set, I'm sure this is the one that's supposed to be the short sword. And then this funky looking thing is his dagger, I suppose. I can get that out of the package. And see it's got a little bit more of a curve to it, almost like a scimitar. So that's pretty neat. Put those aside. Hopefully all of those will have sheaths to hold the figure. Hold on the figure. All right, so this piece in the back is taped in. So let's cut through the tape. We can get that out. And there we go. And then we got the shield, which is held in with a couple of the dreaded plastic tabs. Cut through that real quick. And it is a very nicely sculpted, very nicely painted shield with a lot of detail to it. Now, this seems to be made in a very specific way where it's got a strap and a handle. So clearly the strap, the arm's supposed to go through it and grip the handle over here. So this is intended to be put on his right arm. Get to that in a minute, but get a good look at that shield. Very nicely painted, a lot of good detail to it, like they did, the thing's painted in like a dark silver, and then they put like a black rub over that, so it brings out some of the nooks and crannies of the thing. And then, of course, the eyes and the nose on the skull are painted black. So very cool looking. It's a very thick shield, which is how I remember the original figure's shield as being. So that thing's got to be heavy. You got to be a strong dude to carry around something like that. All right, so I'm not sure how that's attached in. There's another little plastic insert here over what looks to be the sheath for the dagger. And it's tabbed in here at the back, and I'm going to have to cut it from the back, which is difficult with flush with the package. This is why I prefer to, cut it from the inside. It might be easier to get with nail clippers, but I don't know where my nail clippers are right now. I used them to trim my fingernails. So then I lost them. Oh. All right, so there we go. We got the little plastic piece out of there. So hopefully the rest of the figure should be pretty easy to get out. It does have plastic tabs here at the wrist. One's more like lower down on the forearm, practically at the wrist. The other's more sort of up the forearm, near where his elbow is. Hopefully that one shouldn't be too difficult to get. And I found out why they put that plastic piece on there is that you can see that the sheath is actually, it's not actually attached directly to the figure. It's attached to the figure via a chain that it hangs down from. So that must be why they decided they needed to have that little extra plastic piece in there to make sure that it didn't wobble around while the figure was in the package. So be careful of that when you remove it, because sometimes something like that can break if you're not aware of it. But I figured it out. If I'd have known that, I think I would have got that last, though. If I'd have realized that before. Okay, so pretty sure that's all the. Oh, that's a fun place. I'm pretty sure that's all the tabs. Yep, that's all the tabs. There he is out of the package now. And we can observe Warduke in all of its glory, and that is a fantastic looking action figure. So it is just like one chain that holds this on. It's not like, two chains that hold it level. So that thing is meant to kind of move around loosely. So, and then over here we have that must be the sheath for the short sword. Let me move his arm so you can see it a little better. There we go. Some great articulation on this guy. Maybe too much articulation, because he does have like this kind of joint here where not only does it move up and down, but it moves all the way around. A little hindered by the sculpt of the elbow, but you're probably not going to want to have his elbow tilted back that way anyway, unless you're trying to get him into a pose where his elbow is broken or something. And then you've also got this particular joint where then you can rotate the entire bicep all the way around like that. So basically, the rotation here does the same job as the rotation here. So you don't really need to have both of those. This is why I like when they put a double joint in here instead, if they've got a bicep cut already. But, I'm not really going to complain about too much articulation, but technically it's more articulation than it did need. So one of the things I always liked about Warduke's costume is it has like a certain asymmetry to it Like he's got the chainmail armor at his left arm, or yeah, his left arm and his left leg, but not on his right arm and his right leg, which are just uncovered. So I figure it's probably pretty obvious to anybody that knows is that Warduke was probably very much inspired by Frank Frazetta's Death Dealer. He's got a similar sort of look where he's a barbarian with a helmet that shades his entire face, but then you see those red eyes peering out at you. But it does some different things and takes it in some different directions. Like, for example, while Death Dealer would have had a chainmail skirt usually, this guy's got, more like a furry loincloth like you would think of Conan as having. He does have like a skull, kind of like a demon skull belt buckle, like what Death Dealer has. And, he's got the chainmail on the arms and legs, whereas usually both of both the Death Dealer's arms and legs are bare. And of course, he's got bat wings on his helmet instead of the horns that Death Dealer famously has. But the influence, I think, is obvious to anybody who's familiar with Death Dealer and Warduke both. And you can see how how they took some inspiration from the Frank Frazetta paintings. Frank Frazetta being probably the greatest fantasy artist of all time. How could you not? He basically designed this entire aesthetic. It only makes sense that when they went to create their villain, they drew from one of Frazetta's, probably his most famous original character. So yeah, Frazetta did a lot of paintings of licensed stuff. He did a lot of paintings of like John Carter of Mars, and he did a lot of really cool Battlestar Galactica paintings as promotion for that series. So I kind of wish if they did another reboot of Battlestar Galactica, they would base it more on Frank Frazetta's paintings than either of the television shows, because I thought it was a cool, unique look. So let's go ahead and real quick, we'll go through how his accessories fit onto the figure. Everything should fit onto the figure. So this sheath is glued onto the harness, which is mostly glued onto his chest, but it's a little loose in some places, probably so that it won't hinder the articulation. And it does seem like this strap is meant to go over the bicep instead of over the shoulder, which you would expect. But if you look at the angle at which it goes, like I don't think you're supposed to try to loop it back over his tricep like that. And this is a tight fit for this sheath. I mean, you can see that like I hadn't even gotten all the way in there, and it's good and tight. So I don't even know if I'm going to be able to get it all the way in there. It feels so tight. I'm pretty sure, I could probably force it in there. And it seems like it's kind of a hard plastic too. So I was almost kind of thinking, well, maybe I could hit it with a hairdryer and soften it up and get the sword to go in there better, but I don't think that's going to work. So I would not recommend trying to put this sword all the way into this sheath. It seems to me like almost as if it's more decorative and not meant to actually go all the way in. But oh well. I'm probably going to have him on the shelf holding the sword in his hand anyway. And of course, that's going to go into his left hand. And that's going to be a production in and of itself, because this is a very tight grip on this left hand that I'm observing. And I don't want to break the sword. The sword itself is also made of a more rigid material. It's not made of kind of the more traditional type of plastic you think that weapons are usually made out of, where it's that kind of nylon type of plastic. But that makes sense because they want to paint it and get all this paint detail into it. But I don't know, man. It's like the Flash Gordon figures that Neca made. I never had a hard time getting the sword to fit into those. Like those always held the sheath pretty well. But having a hard time getting that one into the sheath. Maybe I'll try something else later. If you've got this figure and you were able to get it in there, let me know in the comments. So I was thinking that this would probably be the sheath that would hold this dagger, but it doesn't seem to want to go in either. And it's one of those things where, like, honestly, the blade is thicker than the slot it's supposed to go into. Let me try to put it in this one over here at the side. See if that works any better. Yeah, okay. So I think that you're supposed to actually put this dagger into this sheath and the short sword into this sheath, which visually doesn't make a lot of sense because this one has a blue hilt and the sheath is brown. And this one has a blue sheath, but the hilt of the dagger is, or short sword, or whatever it is, it's brown. And it seems like it curves in one direction, you see? Like, again, like the dagger curves in one direction. But no, it seems like it's actually intended to go in there that way. Let me check the pictures on the package and see how they did it. I can see a good picture of the dagger or the short sword. Yep, yep. If you look at it on the picture on the inside, so the blue handle is with the brown sheath, and the brown sheath is with the blue handle. That's crazy. But at least I was able to get all the accessories into his I was able to get those two accessories into their particular sheaths. Whereas I don't know if I'm going to have much success with this one, and I don't know if I'm going to try because I don't really want to scratch up the paint on the sword too much. So I think I might just leave it there in his hand. It was a little bit of a struggle to get that sword into his hand, but not as much as I feared it might have been. Basically, what I did was I kind of bent his thumb up a little bit because the plastic is pliable enough to do that, and then I was able to kind of simply rotate the handle of the sword into this very thick armored hand. So, and as I pointed out before when I was looking at the shield, he is intended to hold this sword in his left hand because he has to hold the shield in his right hand. So now that I've got figure out of the package, I want to compare these two hands because there's got to be something that's different about them, unless maybe they accidentally put the wrong hand into my package and gave me two of this same exact hand, which is a possibility. But yeah, I don't see any difference at all between these two hands. If anybody knows what the difference is and wants to let me know in the comments, feel free. So, and then the pointing hand, but I don't think I'm going to bother with all that stuff right now. First, I'm going to go ahead and put this flame on his sword since I've been holding this for a minute. And again, like with the sheath, this is a very tight fit. I kind of wonder if maybe they did not intend for this sword to be as thick as it is. So I'm thinking, man, why don't you want to go all the way on? I'm thinking once I get this on, it's not coming off. I don't want to take a chance on trying to break this sword. I didn't want to scratch up the paint on it or anything. So I'm probably not going to take it off or on too much. And it does look like it's supposed to go all the way down to the hand guard. So I'm going to go down as far as I can. I don't want to take a chance on breaking this sword. So this flame is just going to stay on here forever. And the only reason I can think of I might want to take it off is if I wanted to put it back in the sheath, but I've already established that I think that that's pretty much impossible. So I'm not going to do that again. All right, so going back to talk about his articulation a bit, he can do the splits almost. Not quite no problem because, of course, that loincloth is going to get in the way. But it's still, I think, an impressive range of motion as far as that goes. If one were to get a sword, if one were to get a horse that is in scale with this guy, and I would recommend maybe one of the McFarlane horses, either for The Witcher or the Dark Knight Returns horse from Batman. Like if you have one of those and you want to display him on a horse, that would be a good horse to display him on. But the articulation is good enough that I think you could get him onto a horse fairly easily. There is a boot cut here and rocker ankles. So you can get these legs into a good horse riding position or a good battle stance. I will say that at least on my example, this ankle is a bit tight, so I would advise not trying to force that. If you have tight ankles, again, don't force it. If you got to use a hair dryer or dip it in some hot water to soften it up. I prefer the hair dryer method myself, just because I don't like for my action figures to get any more wet than they have to. And it's like, it can kind of interfere with the paint and everything. So I don't like to do that if I can avoid it. So I don't know if am I gonna try to actually fit this. So I think now I figured out why he might have two of the same exact hand. And that's because it's actually going to be easier to get this hand around the shield while it's off the figure, I think, and then replace the hands. So that's actually kind of clever if that's the case. So again, like with the sword, I'm kind of trying to, pull the fingers and the thumb apart while I put it on there, because I think that's going to be the easiest way to do it. And then once I do that, I'm going to pull the first hand that's already in there out of his hand, and there we go. And I think that should go in a little easier. So it doesn't seem to be gripping this very tightly, but I don't think that really matters. It grips it in such a way where like it's not going to come off because of how the fingers and the thumb wrap around it. But it's not tight so much in that it grips it tightly so much as that it's not going to let go, if that makes any sense. So let's go ahead and pull Warduke's other hand out of there. That came out without any kind of issue. And then we'll insert the forearm in there. And then once I have the forearm inserted in there, I will try to press this wrist peg into the forearm. And voila! I think that's going to be the easiest way for one to put his shield in or take his shield out. And then if you want to have him hold one of his other weapons, it's going to be easier to just replace the hand than to try to take the shield off of it. So I think that's probably why they have the two extra hands that both are identical. And then of course the one alternate hand we have for the left hand is more of an open hand. So you could pose him with the sword in the right hand instead, but I prefer to think that Warduke is a lefty. Right? He follows the left hand path, So so yeah, and plus it just makes sense with the way that his armor is set up. Is that he uses the shield to protect his right hand side, and while the shield is protecting his right hand side, the chainmail protects his left hand side, which is where he holds his sword. So a lot of thought went into the design of this figure, and I don't know if this is a figure that was designed by people working for THR, or if the action figure company, which would have been LJN, would have designed that figure in house. I have no idea. It might be interesting to look into who designed Warduke and Strongheart and the rest of the characters that wound up making the original Dungeons and Dragons line. But Warduke was definitely my favorite. He's just got such a cool design. It's interesting also as I look at it is that this amulet is glued straight to his chest, so you won't be able to move that around. Like if you think to yourself, oh, it might be cool to have it kind of tilted one way or the other to match an action pose or something like that. Unfortunately, he's not going to be able to do it. But yeah, he's a really cool, imposing looking figure. And now I want to try to compare him, like I said, in terms of scale to Wonder Woman here. I printed out, like I do most of these Zip Guy figures that I make, I printed her out at about 110%. So you can see that, like, at 110%, she stands just as tall as Warduke. But if you printed her at 100%, she would be a bit smaller. So I could do like with my old Superpowers figures and have her fight Warduke and pretend like he's Ares if I wanted to. But of course, by this point, they've actually made Ares action figures that some of which would even be in scale with her. So I don't know if that's really necessary anymore. And if you wanted to have Warduke visit Eternia and cause some havoc there, he does stand at about the same height as He-Man. Now, his bulk is not quite as much as He-Man's because obviously Warduke has a much more, while still a very muscular and impressive build, it's a bit more realistic than the ridiculous pumped up proportions of He-Man, since obviously he's supposed to be just like this massive wall of muscle, and no human being could attain this kind of, like, short of the Hulk, like He-Man's like one of the biggest characters in terms of like muscular proportions. But I do feel like they do look like they could work pretty well together, and you could have a good fight between the two of them. So yeah, uh, I'm glad to have this figure. He's a really impressive figure in his own right, and my own childhood nostalgia for one of the coolest action figures I ever owned when I was a kid. It's kicked in, and I'm glad to have this more modern, updated take done with all the style that I like of NECA and all the detailing of the paint and everything, and it all just comes together so nicely. I like the metallic colors, which is how the character kind of always existed in my head. Yeah, they had to use those kind of more flat colors in the action figures of the time, and I figure a lot of that is because, like, maybe the metallic colors were a little more expensive back then, and even if they weren't, maybe it was because the metallic colors a lot of times could tend to be kind of delicate. And anybody who ever owned one of the original Cobra officers or any GI Joe figure that had any silver paint whatsoever on it can tell you how, like, basically like 5 minutes after you had that thing out of the package, like, you'd have paint rubs all over it. But Warduke, uh, when you do the modern version of them, you gotta have that metallic blue, you gotta have that gold, and he just looks sharp. So I'm pretty happy with this figure. I talked about it for over a half an hour. This is a long video, but there's a lot to discuss as far as this guy goes. I hope they do more of the classic Dungeons and Dragons figures in this NECA style. I would definitely like to have Strongheart because, like I said, the two Dungeons and Dragons figures that I did have when I was a kid was Warduke and Strongheart. But characters like I don't even remember their names very much because I didn't even have them. But characters like goblins and elves and things like that, where you can really flesh out your Dungeons and Dragons world. Now, me personally, I've never played the role playing game of Dungeons and Dragons, but it is the sort of thing where it takes a lot of obvious cues from fantasy concepts that were popular at that time and continue to be popular today. I would say probably the two biggest influences that I can observe on Dungeons and Dragons would be the writings of J.R.R. Tolkien, probably the most important thing that influenced Dungeons and Dragons. Like it's pretty heavily Middle Earth inspired, and B, the paintings of Frank Frazetta, who, as I said, I believe is the greatest fantasy artist of all time. And of course, like I said, Warduke took a lot of inspiration from Death Dealer visually, and Death Dealer is probably one of my favorite things Frank Frazetta ever did. And if you're interested in Death Dealer, check out also another video on my channel where I talk about a custom Masters of the Universe Origins Death Dealer figure that I made myself. I might try to make a Warduke in Origins scale because, like, even though, like I said, it's pretty cool that this is a guy who could stand toe to toe with my Masters classics and my Masterverse He-Man. It would be cool to have one that could actually fight the vintage one. So, like I would have wanted to do when I was a kid. But if I do that, obviously I'll do a video about my Origins Warduke. But yeah, he's really cool. I'm really happy with him, and definitely recommend him. Only issue I can really think of is, like I said, I had a hard time trying to get that sword into the sheath. Maybe somebody a little more clever than I am can accomplish it. But I'm just gonna leave the flames on here, so that way I don't have to worry about like, scratching up the paint when I take it off, or maybe I already scratched up the paint when I put the thing on. But you can't really see that well anyway once the flames on there, and it looks really cool and impressive. So that's it. If you enjoyed this video, please like and subscribe and all the fun YouTube stuff down below. If you would like to participate in any of these live streams that I do while they're going on, make sure you hit the little bell so that way you can be notified when they are going on, and you can join in and leave a comment if you like. As I've said before, these live streams aren't really designed to be live streams in that sort of sense. I'm just kind of making them this way because it's a little more convenient to me. But I don't mind having a little bit of chat while I open these figures, and it could even make them a little more entertaining for other people watching. So if you would like to do that, just make sure you hit the bell for the notifications, and that way you can be notified. You can join in on the fun. But that's it for this episode. I might go ahead and do another episode tonight because I do have, for anybody who's interested in upcoming episodes, I now have all 3 of the latest wave of McFarlane's superpowers, which is, speaking of bad guys with swords and chainmail, we got Deathstroke. Speaking of Wonder Woman, we have Wonder Woman. And nobody was really talking about Nightwing, but he's still pretty cool, isn't he? So I'll be opening those up soon. Hopefully this week I can knock all 3 of these out. So that's pretty much it for this time. We will talk to you next time. Bye.